We're going to go ahead and begin. Thank you for joining today. As a reminder, we're recording this webinar so that it'll be available again after the fact if you want to reach back to it and review anything that we've covered. This is a four-part series on learning how to deliver value through IT while complying with the VA modernization plan. And today's part two, we're going to discuss cloud data management. We've got our partners from Rubrik here today to talk about the solution and show or walk you through a demo of the product. Our panelists today, BJ from the Federal Channel Manager for Rubrik, Dave, Federal Systems Engineer, specifically for the VA from Rubrik, Zach from Diversified is our IT subject matter expert, and I'll be your moderator today. My name is Nathan. I'm the Director of Sales for the Intelligent Technology Solutions. Our agenda today, we're going to take a little bit of time here for Zach to talk about Diversified and give an overview, and he'll transition by giving some of the benefits of Rubrik. We'll pass the mic over to BJ from that point to talk about Rubrik as a company and give an overview of the solution and what they have to offer. And we'll wrap up with Dave giving us a deep dive demo of the tool itself. As far as question and answers go, throughout the meeting, we'll pause in between handing off to new speakers and give everyone an opportunity to ask questions at that point. As we're going through, please feel free to enter your questions into the question and answer section in your chat. You can send them to all panelists. That'll be best because the presenter may not be looking at it. I'll be moderating those, and when we pause, we'll circle back to any questions that come up as we move through. Your mics, you have control of them. You can mute and unmute yourself. So we ask that as we're speaking, please remain on mute for background noise, and then when we have the opportunity to speak, feel free to jump in and ask away. Before I pass the mic to Zach, I'll ask if there's any questions out there about what we're covering today. Questions in general. All right, that said, I'm going to pass it over to Zach.
Nathan, thanks as always for moderating this. We really appreciate it, and thank you, Rubrik, for joining us today to try and help educate some people on what you do and how you can help them in their environment. But before we get started off, I wanted to start off with a quick little joke. Hey, BJ, do you know why the cloud is like the Hotel California?
I do think I do know why the cloud is like the Hotel California. Perhaps because it's very easy to get in, but very difficult to get out. Is that true?
Yeah, you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. So,
and I love the Eagles, ironically, so that's awesome.
Yes, so we'll just leave you with that, then we'll get started. If you were with us last week, we just did a quick overview of Diversified. I'm going to do the same thing again today. So second largest AV integrator in the world, we realized that we're moving towards IP-based technologies, and we needed to focus on that as well to really serve the full needs of our customer base. So we're not just an AV integrator. We are a total technology solutions provider. Founded in '93, over 1,500 employees. You see our revenue projections for this year is supposed to be $1 billion by 2020. 3 network operations centers, one in Atlanta, one in New Jersey, one in California that monitor over 300,000 endpoints. And we have a great customer sat rating done by a third-party vendor out there. So I think the thing that really separates us from the competitors in this industry is not only can we, consult, design, and source the solutions that you need, but we can install and manage them after the fact. And that's why we say we're a total technology solutions provider. We're an engineering-led first firm. I know that not everyone on this call is federal, and that's fine. I think this information transcends across the federal environment to commercial or whatever industry you may be in. But we wanted to throw this slide up there for our federal customers because we targeted this to the VA. We know how important it is to work with small businesses in the federal government. So we have the ability to utilize several contracts and small businesses to make sure we're check marking all the boxes that we need to. This is our nationwide support, so really no matter where you're at in the country, we have the ability to support you with a relatively local office, and I think that's compelling. We have 32 offices in the U.S., we have one in South Korea, and we're looking to expand internationally further over the next few years. And these are just some of our certifications that are relevant to the IT industry. You can see that we hold a lot of them, and we're very well versed and knowledgeable across the stack. All right, so divisions. Diversified has a one hand to shake philosophy. We feel that we can do everything from the four walls in. So anything that you need for your environment, we can do. So mission critical environments, NOx and SOx, sports and live events group. I think there was a quote where we did 80% of the sporting arenas out there. Structured cabling, advanced visual environments, intelligent technology solutions, which is think IT or those type of solutions, and our federal solutions group as well. But there's really nothing that we can't support you with in your business ventures. All right, now these next few slides, since this is a cloud data management webinar, I just wanted to throw out there that while everyone talks about cloud, it is an important priority for the federal government. So a couple of things have come out. I think back in 2011, they came out with the Cloud First Initiative. People within the federal government were asked to move, anything that they could to the cloud that made sense. The FATARA data center and optimization consolidation mandate came out a couple of years back. That's about reducing your footprint and making your data center more efficient. And then the Modernizing Government Technology Act was signed into law this year. And that's injecting a working capital fund, I think $500 million over the next 2 years for technology investments that help you meet all those mandates. So this is taken directly from the VA modernization effort. And as you can see, they want to standardize on a public-private cloud hybrid architecture, which Rubrik can definitely help you achieve there. Streamlined cloud development, highly reliable and available infrastructure, and a significant reduction of VA-owned data centers. And like I said, I don't think that this is just specific to the VA. I think these are trends you will see across the IT industry. So the one I really wanted to hit on here was, this is from the VA. This is their National Cloud Transition Plan. If you look at 2019 here, design cloud management and monitoring functions, continue to sunset migrated data center and applications, and develop automated migration services. I think we're going to hit on all those today in this webinar. So we just really wanted to point out that we are being relevant. Now, why Rubrik? So these are some of the things that I like about Rubrik, and I'll tell another little story. I'm co-lead of the Atlanta VMware user group, and one of my buddies, the other co-lead, is the Azure or cloud architect for a company called RentPath. Think of, if you want to rent an apartment, all these websites that you can go on and find them. So you can imagine the amount of data they had. He is going through the process right now of migrating, I think, 200 terabytes of on-prem data up to Azure. And I was talking to him about it the other day, and I said, what do you wish you had to make your life easier? Because he's just beating his head against the wall for this transition. And he said, if I had 2 Rubrik bricks, I could have finished this in about a third of the time. That's pretty strong coming from a guy that's currently doing a cloud migration. So why do we like Rubrik at Diversified? It takes all the guesswork out of keeping up with the backup policy. Automation and orchestration are the big words we hit on in our webinar last week. you're not going to run into a backup storm because you have everything trying to back up at the same time. Rubrik is going to take the best work out of it for you. Rubrik can lag on VM straight from the appliance, and then Rubrik can restore individual files. And then one of the things that I think is very important, the Rubrik interface is very intuitive. Our data center SE, who does a lot of installs, went to the Rubrik install training recently and said it was very easy to learn. In about half a day, you could become a master of it and get everything out of it that you need to be proficient. So that's just a little spiel to introduce the slide and talk about Rubrik. And now I'm going to pass it over to BJ to let him really get into the meat of this presentation.
And BJ, before you get started, we'll pause for just a second to see if anyone has any questions thus far.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Having heard none, BJ, it's up on you.
Hey, I really appreciate it. We appreciate being invited. Certainly big fans of Diversified, and Zach, I like that background on Rubrik. So BJ Kalemi, I work our federal channel here at Rubrik, and really today we're going to go over a little bit about the Rubrik value proposition, what we look for in terms of targeting customers, what customers are a good fit for the Rubrik technology, how to be vigilant for where Rubrik could fit into your working conditions, to your technology. And then lastly, why is Rubrik in the industry, in the IT industry, why is it so strong? So we'll cover all of that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. If you have any questions, we have all the heavy hitters on this line now. Please ask. Try to stump us. Any questions you have, we'll be able to answer them in real time. I'm very confident of that. It's important that we start out, that we understand to be a disruptive technology, you have to have a better price point. You have to be simple. You have to offer superior performance. And we do all of that. But something else you have to do to be truly disruptive is to galvanize a new space. And that's what Rubrik does. We're not just a backup company or an automation company. We're truly a cloud data management company. And this space is something that's growing with the growth of cloud. And it's what we're going to hear about going more and more and more into IT going forward. So that space that Rubrik is creating is literally called cloud data management. You may not have heard of it yet. You certainly will in the weeks and months and years to come. Now, we can go one more on this slide. Actually, there we go. I love to quote Shakespeare, one, because I don't read that much and I love to sound smart, but uneasy at the head that wears the crown. So when you look at some of the people on this slide, the Commvaults, the Veritas, the Dell EMC, great companies, but their legacy. And they don't have the ability to go back in time and be woven with the API fabric that Rubrik is. So the reason why I show this slide is I want to show the space in some of the groups that will be dethroning. And I also want people to understand that the legacy vendors, the reason why they are legacy is because they're complex, they're expensive, and their performance is not that of Rubrik. So, you know, it's kind of the tale of two companies, right? Some are weaning, some are waxing, and that's why I like to show this slide. Now, this is super important to understand. As a fast-growing company, I always want people to be interested in two things. One, who the heck is investing in Rubrik and why? If you look at John Thompson, not only was he the former CEO of Symantec, he's also on the board of Rubrik and certainly on the board of Microsoft Azure. We'll get into some cloud capabilities later, but I mean, that should resonate for everyone. Data Domain, another group that we're here to dethrone. We see that Frank Slootman from Data Domain, one of the first investors, and then lastly, Mark Leslie from Veritas. So when you have three of the largest companies that are in this space, that were quote unquote legacy, that initially invested in Rubrik and believed in Rubrik, believed in the technology, that gives credence to what we're doing, and most importantly, why we're doing it. Better performance, better price point, much, much, much simpler. Now, I love Johnny Cash, but the reason why this slide is so important is Rubrik walks the line, and we do this in 3 ways, quite literally. One of the biggest federal initiatives, particularly for the VA, is to be able to archive and to migrate data to the cloud. So from an end user perspective, we're able to get our end users, our customers, to the cloud. From an FSI or solution provider perspective, just like Diversified, we're able to help them get their customers to the cloud and monetize the cloud. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the cloud providers, the Azures, the Googles, the AWSs, we drive consumption to their cloud. So when it comes to cloud, we drive consumption to the public cloud providers, check. We help our customers get to the cloud, whether that be instantiation or archiving. And then lastly, we help our partners, our FSIs, and our solution providers get their customers to the cloud and to monetize the cloud. Super important. Now, there we go. And I always think when we say, boy, there's this big market, it's cloud data management, what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of aspects to it, a lot of which can be, you know, we're great with backup and recovery. That's certainly one use case. We're great at defragmenting data and giving the customer the ability to leverage all of their data, all of their points, and to get analytics from that. Predictive search, copy data management, these are all components of what is cloud data. That's one of the biggest use cases. And then analytics, where we defragment the data and we look at that holistically and enable our customers to leverage data. Perfect, perfect. I always love to show this slide because I want customers to be aware and to be vigilant for where Rubrik can help them, right? If you're a highly virtualized environment, if you have 200 VMs or more, if you desperately want to get to the cloud, you know, you have pain points that perhaps things you're doing currently for backup and recovery and cloud migration aren't great. And lastly, if you're growing fast in terms of data production, these are all places that we can help. And there's a quote I'd like to share with you. Data used to be the exhaust of IT. Now it's the fuel. So you need to let that sink in and really think about that. Data now is so important, and to have a company that gives you the ability to do more with your data less expensively is huge. Now, if you really think about it, and I'll go back in time, and I want to make this very simple because the essence of today is about simplicity. Occam's razor is a theory that the hypothesis with the fewest pieces, the hypothesis with the fewest components is the best hypothesis. Occam's razor. So when you think of why is Rubrik superior, yes, performance, and yes, we enable our customers to do things. But at the end of the day, at the end user level, it's about simplicity. So we are less expensive. We are built on an API fabric. We can completely web-based scale, meaning there's never a forklift And boy, we can go on-prem, off-prem, public cloud, private cloud. We can do all of these things, and that's great. But the most important thing is, while we're doing this, we're doing it simplistically. And that is what resonates with the IT community. That's why things are so on fire at Rubrik today. There you go. Now, I'm actually working today out of an office in Reston, Virginia. I've lived and worked here for 20 years. So I have many, many, many friends who work as federal end users, whether it be Intel, civilian, or DoD. The reason why this slide is so crucial from an end user perspective is because if you want someone to really look at a solution, you need to, what I call, check the boxes. You need to align with federal initiatives. Number one, data center optimization and consolidation. I promise you, that is the essence of Rubrik. We take a lot of different disparate hardware and software, and we put them into one software-based appliance. So check for data center optimization, consolidation. Now, security. If there's any group that's going to talk about we're going to manage your data, we're going to migrate your data, security is number one. We're FIPS 140-2 level 1 and 2 certified. We encrypt at rest and in flight, and we make all of your data from day one. The moment it hits our software-based appliance, we make your data immutable to ransomware. Every day I see more and more articles about ransomware attacks and what it's doing at an end user level, particularly within the federal government. So checkbox number 2 for security. API, data is the new oil, and APIs are the new pipeline. So like I said before about some of the legacy vendors, they can't go back in time. They don't have that luxury. Our fabric from day one, our software, is based on APIs. So we can easily weave into the cloud. We easily can talk to Splunk and ServiceNow and Puppet and Chef. We can easily be an application service provider for a lot of the best FSIs and solution providers out there. So that's where we are, right? So check number 3 for API-based and the ability to have a software that is into automation and makes things easier from that perspective. And then lastly, most importantly, we would not be here today if it weren't for the cloud. You're hearing a raspy voice right now. When I tell you technologically unsavvy, that's an understatement. I have a 6S, I barely know how to use it, my little iPhone. I have 3 different cloud providers on my iPhone. And if you would have told me 4 years ago that I was going to be doing that, I would have laughed. Just like if you would have told me 4 years ago that 85% of our federal end users across the board have an absolute mandate and initiative to at least begin archiving to the cloud, I would have laughed. Well, I promise you I'm not laughing now. So with Rubrik, we have the ability with the 3 big public clouds, we can instantiate and archive within AWS and Azure, and currently we can archive in Google, soon to be able to instantiate. That's cloud migration. In terms of cloud orchestration, we have the ability, so you're not locked in, to have you fail over from cloud to cloud and have you with different abilities to be on more than one cloud at one time. So back in the old days, the only hindrance to why more people were on the cloud was latency, was security, and was price point. So the last thing, and this goes back to what Zach said, the Hotel California. Well, David is going to get into our file-based searching and why that's so important. But I'll leave you with this on the last part with cloud. Because we have the ability to keep all the metadata on our software-based appliance, when we go to extract data from the cloud, we don't have to get it at an application or at a VM. We can go down to that file level. So the egress of data back down from the cloud is much faster, more efficient, and for the end user, much, much less expensive. So here we are. Now, I'm a C-level within any federal end user today, within any federal agency, and I have an initiative for data center optimization. I have an initiative for security. I have an initiative for automation. I have an initiative for cloud. Well, you have an initiative for Rubrik then. Quite literally, that's what we do. And people always want to talk about why. That's your answer. Lastly, I'd like to show this so it's not anecdotal. Sure, FIPS 140-2 level 2, I get that. And I understand we're immutable to ransomware. I understand we encrypt in flight and at rest. But I also need people, everyone, to understand in the community the amount of time and diligence we've taken to get all of our accreditations. The only two within the landscape of the entire Fed. We're completely finished on the Intel side, completely finished on the civilian side in terms of needing any certifications. The only two we're waiting on are our CON for the Army, our Certificate of Net Worthiness, and our DISA STIG, both of which we'll have easily within the next 60 days. And this gives credibility to what our federal organization within Rubrik has been able to achieve in a very short period of time. Moreover, it gives credibility to the technology. There's a lot of eyes on this. A lot of people that say, why would I use Rubrik? Am I vulnerable? The answer to that question is you have to use Rubrik for the 4 initiatives, and you're completely not vulnerable. In fact, you're protecting your data better. You're leveraging your analytics more with Rubrik. And that's why I need to show this slide to anyone that'll watch, and it resonates with me. I know it does. And it resonates with all the partners and all the federal end users that we talk to daily. Now, let's go back in time, 1990s, when we looked at backup and recovery. There were a tremendous amount of aspects to it. And let's say, for instance, I was a database manager, an IT manager, or even, a backup and recovery manager. I can't emphasize the amount of complexity, cost, humanware, hardware, software that goes into it. These are all disparate pieces that were never meant to work together. It was created ad hoc to begin with. Backup and recovery is an insurance policy. It's never been primary. It was always about compliance. We have to keep some type of data. It was never on the front forum. No one ever took a look and said, now wait a minute, what's a better way to do this? So all of a sudden you had a software that was running on different types of servers. Then to even scale things out more, you had proxy servers. Then you had to get some type of replication software. You went into big SQL servers or big Oracle databases. You'd have to then take it over to transfer over the data to tape and then take that to like an Iron Mountain somewhere. I mean, can you imagine the time, the cost, the energy? And now, let's say, for instance, I was responsible for this in the 90s. Can you imagine scaling? How many different servers would I require to run the software on? What type of secondary storage? Do I need to rip out my secondary storage and put a new box in? There's so many different components to it and pieces to it. Let's go to 1995. We can go back one slide. Let's go to 1995 now. The only nuance, the only subtle change was deduplication and compression from data domain. And that's fine. The problem is it wasn't simple. We added yet another layer of complexity. So now keep in mind, if I ran this at an end user level, this is costing me money. I'm trying to weave together about 8 or 9 disparate hardware, softwares and the humanware, the amount of human capital, the amount of time, the amount of investment, the amount of sweat equity that went into this was tremendous. Nobody loved it. If you talk to any group about backup and recovery, even today, before they've taken advantage of Rubrik technology, it's a very unpleasant story. In fact, within Rubrik, we call this dragging through the glass. Anytime you have anyone talk about backup and recovery, there's one word that comes up, actually two: pain and complexity. That's what drives the Rubrik solution. All right, well, I'd like to pass the baton to one of our best system engineers and engineers in general, David Wada, who certainly does a lot within the VA community for us.
Hi, everybody. We'll jump into this, and I guess I'll talk about a few slides here, and then we'll jump into a demo. And I like to keep things interactive, so anybody that has questions, chime in, and we'll take care of them. So this is probably what your data center today looks like. Multiple components, backup proxies, backup servers, search servers, your disk-based backup like data domain appliance. And you've got, for true archive, really the only solution until recent years was a tape archive. And then you've got to get that off-site to meet your DR checkbox. So a true DR site residing at least 250 miles away. So what does Rubrik do? We collapse all of that into a converged appliance, software and hardware-based solution. So it removes that complexity and puts everything under kind of an umbrella of simplicity. Go ahead to the next slide. So again, we collapse that into a Rubrik appliance. Again, it's a 2U 4-node system. Each one of those is called a brick, and that has about 30,000 IOPS, simplifying that entire software stack and hardware stack. And that scales infinitely into web scale architecture. Think of Amazon, Facebook, Google. They support millions and millions of users on a daily basis. So we can theoretically infinitely scale with your data growth, with your performance needs, all of that. And it's a true masterless design. So you can add as many bricks into that cluster as you'd like. They can be local, they can be at a DR facility, and they can also be instances in the cloud as well. And from a cloud out perspective, our archive now, so if you look at your existing tape solution now, becomes any cloud target. And for Rubrik, the cloud is a very subjective term. For us, it can be public, it can be private, it can be hybrid, it can be an object store, or any real storage that we can access, such as existing NFS storage that you've got locally. It can reside at a different site, so you could have a private NFS store somewhere, and for us, that is essentially the cloud. We can send data to any of those very quickly and easily. You can go ahead and jump out to the next slide. And go ahead and build out the whole slide until it, there we go. Actually, there's a few more. And one more, I believe. There we go. So, go back one. So how does Rubrik work? So one of my counterparts, actually, and we'll cover each one of these points to the right, on the right side of this slide. Essentially, we can, from a quick start perspective, really to get Rubrik implemented in your environment, we can rack and go literally within about an hour and a half. We call it pallet to production in under an hour, actually. So from that standpoint, if you've got network connectivity, you've got your power all in place, ready to go, you can rack the Rubrik appliance and literally start protecting your data within that hour. We ingest data extremely fast. We're a flash optimized front end. We can do parallel ingest at that point as well. And this is where it I call it our workbench, essentially. This is where deduplication happens. It's also where encryption and compression, all of that as we ingest that data into a single global namespace. And we'll get into that a little bit with the demo as well. Again, we can scale out from that point and continue to add bricks, and it also will scale your performance. We automate the ingestion process by creating an SLA policy. The SLA policy engine essentially, if you're familiar with legacy vendors like Veritas, Commvault, Veeam, where you've got backup jobs that are very lengthy, you can have hundreds of them. One of my counterparts actually did a Commvault removal, put Rubrik in place. Commvault had 752 backup jobs in that environment. When we were done and when Rubrik was up and running, we had a total of 7. So if you think of just from a daily management perspective, that SLA policy engine, the automation that's tied into that and the intelligence that is tied into that greatly reduces the complexity environment in your everyday administrative tasks. So you can actually create one policy that covers your entire environment. Now you can get granular if you want, depending on different data sets, depending on different objects you're backing up as well. And where we shine, this is the recovery aspect, I'll call it search and recovery, is where we shine. We blow away all of our competitors with the ability, because as we ingest that data into that single global namespace, the ability to, with a couple keystrokes and a few mouse clicks, not only find your data, but instantly restore that data as well. So think of a Google-like search. If you've got a specific object, maybe it's a specific file where one of your users came in and said, hey, yesterday, it's Monday morning. Friday, I had my file. I came in Monday. I don't know what happened to it, but it's gone. I can't find it. And they can give you the file name, literally a couple keystrokes for that file name. You can find it and instantly recover it back to its original location, or download it to a temp folder, or put it on a USB key and put it in their hand. And of course, everything that we do is secure from end to end. As BJ said earlier, we're FIPS 140-2 certified, and that's data at rest, data in flight. So as we ingest that data, again, whether it be from a physical machine, virtual machine, SQL, Oracle database, NAS share, any of that, that data is all secure. And it will continue to be secure, even if it's sent to the cloud. That would be encrypted as well in flight, and also the keys reside at your primary location. So you control the keys. Any data that would be sent to the cloud would be encrypted with those keys, which is completely inaccessible without them. And then, of course, as I spoke a little bit about from a cloud perspective, that is obviously secure as well. And for us, cloud is a very subjective term. It's basically any data that we can access, or any data store that we can access and send data to. Again, public, private, hybrid, NFS object store, whatever it might be, we can use those as a target. We can jump to the next slide there. So again, in simplifying that environment, as BJ talked about earlier, we can run in the cloud. And if you look at the different aspects of the slide, we can transverse clouds. So we can have a Rubrik appliance at site A. We can replicate that data to your DR site. We can simultaneously send that data to the cloud for a long-term archive. So you're covering all the bases. You can have secondary, tertiary copies of data, and they can be in different locations. So that covers a smoking hole scenario where your primary data center is just gone or completely inaccessible. You can utilize your DR site in the cloud for full recovery. If you want, you can just use the cloud and use the cloud as your DR site as well. BJ touched on it a little bit earlier. You got to look at cost when employing that model, because you can exceed your allowable budget when you need to go ahead and pull that data back. So again, whether we're local at your primary site, remote at your DR site, or long-term archive in the cloud, and again, for us, cloud, we can transverse either one, or I'm sorry, all of them. So whether you're at, let's say you're utilizing AWS and you're also utilizing Azure, you can actually back up instances from each cloud to the other one. So as long as you have an instance of Rubrik running, you have full capability with all of the features that we have, whether it's local, remote, or in the cloud. Go ahead to the next slide.
There we go.
BJ, go ahead. You want to take the use cases?
Yeah, I will. Thank you, David. That was excellent. We're going to go over a few use cases here. I'd like to take a quick pause to see if anyone has any questions. I know we've covered quite a bit. David's getting ready to do a demo, so we can see a live demo of this software-based appliance and how it works. I come across all of our sales teams for Fed in North America on a daily basis. And something I'd like to share are use cases. A lot of times when we talk about cloud data management, we talk about backup and recovery, people kind of lump us in because we say, boy, here's who we're dethroning, you know, Veritas and Commvault and Dell EMC data domain, and that's fine. But backup and recovery is one of about 10 or 12 use cases for Rubrik. So I'd like to have the slide up so we can intimately go over some other use cases that people may not know about. Certainly cloud. The ability to migrate to the cloud is very easy. When someone says, boy, what is cloud migration? That would mean I'm archiving to the cloud. Cloud orchestration would mean the ability to share from cloud to cloud, to fail over from cloud to cloud, and then certainly to instantiate, to run an instance in the cloud. And that gets us to number 4, DR. I mean, it's almost inappropriate nowadays to have your DR site within your primary site, because if you have a disaster, that would be literally disastrous. So the thought of being able to spin up your DR as you need it, to save all of that money until you require it, and to have it replicated in remote locations within the cloud, that's huge. So backup and recovery is one. DR is huge. Cloud orchestration and migration, we know what that is. Now imagine if I had the ability and I was an application writer or script writer, and I wanted to test some patching, or I was doing some development on automation software. I don't want to go into my primary. Rubrik gives you the ability to grab your latest primary batch, replicate it, and then use that in the sandbox. So your production is going smooth. You're not affecting anything in terms of time, performance. You're not vulnerable to anything, but you have your latest copy of production data that you can now use for patch management and testing development in terms of applications and automation. Now, cyber threat mitigation, we already talked about that, but I want to go over it again. The moment any data touches our brick, not only does it give us the ability to fully index, and we know where that data is, and we can take away all of the stratification, we can bring the data together, but it makes data completely immutable to ransomware. And you know that the ability to go to cloud sometimes was hurt by security. So when it comes from a security standpoint, it's why you should leverage Rubrik, it's why you should leverage the cloud going forward. And then lastly, automation. I had a quote for APIs earlier, and that really matters. So our fabric, we are a software-based appliance, but because we're woven of the API ilk, it gives us the ability to work with so many different softwares. It gives our openness in terms of how you can script our software and really change what we do on the fly. And then if you hear about weaving into, instantiating into the public cloud, or the ability to work with Splunk and Puppet and Chef, ServiceNow for automation to make things simpler, these are all things that other groups can't do because they weren't originally formulated to do so. From day one, we were set up to completely scale. From day one, we were set up to leverage the cloud. And for day one, we were set up to work well and to be woven into other software bases that are too are API. So I wanted to show this slide because, man, if I just talk about backup and recovery, I'm literally talking about 10 or 20% of what Rubrik is able to do day one for our customers, and that should really resonate.
Okay, great. Thanks, BJ and Dave. We're going to pass the ball over to Dave for a demo, but before I do, I want to open the floor to any questions that are out there. We've got one queued up in the question and answer chat, but anyone live first?
Try to stump us. We don't think you can.
All right, no takers on that. So we have one. Maybe this is for Zach to answer. So the question is, I have some working capital funds that have been allocated due to the modernizing government technology mandate. Does Rubrik address this?
Yeah, I'll take that one really quick, Nathan, just briefly so we can get into the demo. But short answer is yes. You know, a lot of agencies had to apply for those working capital funds to address their technology infrastructure modernization, which is what the basis of the act was. Rubrik addresses all that, you know, consolidation, smaller footprint, using automation, leveraging the cloud. So there's really no box that it doesn't check, as well as, you know, the security, which BJ and Dave have both hit on. So yes, that is something it addresses, and we can definitely help you fill out a template to how Rubrik addresses that.
All right, Dave, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. Can you see the dashboard there, just to make sure?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to jump into here, into the interface, and I'm going to cover 3 things, and we'll try to do this in about 10 minutes, so we can leave some time for a question and answer as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an SLA policy, so you can see how simple and efficient that is. I'm going to do a live mount VM, which is restoring a VM directly onto our appliance that is running on Rubrik, and it's a fully active running VM as well. And I'm also going to show you how simple a file level restore is. And again, that can be from the cloud, that can be from your DR site, or sitting locally. Once we ingest data, we don't care where it sits. You have that same accessibility and ease of access to that data. So I'll start off here. This is kind of a standard dashboard. And again, as BJ talked about, we are an API-first architecture. This dashboard, this interface, is all HTML5. So there is absolutely no Java, no Flash, no plugins required, which a lot of customers, that's the selling point right there, just based on that. So first, I'm going to jump into our SLA domains, and I'm going to create one. As you can see here, there's a bunch of SLAs already created. This is our lab environment, so on any given day, there's probably 100 or more of me in here doing the same thing that we're doing right now. One of the things that I think are kind of a cool feature is I can take the mouse over each one of these SLA policies, and if I forget which one, what the parameters were for each one that I create, I simply mouse over these aspects here, and it shows up in the little window right there to my right. I like to point that out because I think it's a very cool feature that was well thought out. So the first thing we're going to do is create an SLA domain, and we're going to name it. So for the purposes of this, I just use my initials and test, and we'll call this 11. And if you look at these boxes here, these entry points, your recovery point is on the left, and your retention period is on the right in those columns. So typically, I'll just do a kind of an overlapping SLA. And let's say I want to take a snapshot every hour, and I want to keep that hourly snapshot. Let's say I want to keep it 2 days. I also want to take a snapshot every day, and I'm going to keep that for 31 days, basically for a month. Then I also want to take a snapshot one every month, and I want to keep that for 1 year, and I'll do a snapshot every year, and I will keep that for as long as I want to. Obviously, the VA, some of our customers have already talked about, there's a mandate that data must be saved 75 years post-mortem, I believe is the record. So you can see that touches up into, medical data for our veterans could be 150, 175 years, depending on how long, their life expectancy is. So for the purposes of this, we're just going to do 1 year, so it makes the slider bar a little bit easier, which we'll show you in a second. At that point, I can set my backup window right here down at the bottom, and I can say if I wanted it to execute from midnight to 6 a.m., I can put those parameters in there as well. So now that we've got our basic SLA created, we're going to go and do our remote storage configuration for this SLA policy. So we'll turn on archiving, and essentially, again, archiving for us is any location that we can send data to. We can use it, whether it be public, private, or hybrid cloud, or any other target. So this little slider bar here, what this indicates, this little ball, everything to the left of this, and when I set my parameters, everything to the left will be stored locally, and everything to the right will be stored off to our archive location. In this case, I'm going to set it for 31 days. So I've got 31 days that are sitting on my local appliance or my local instance of Rubrik. Anything on day 32, that will be sent off to our archive target. And replication works the exact same way. We don't have our replication target set up for in this lab currently. But in this case, let's say we're going to use AWS. And basically right there, our SLA policy is done. And that's all we have to do to create a governing SLA policy. Now we set those parameters. Those parameters might work for our entire data set, everything in our environment. A lot of times that's not the case. You have different SLAs for different data sets. So at that point, if we applied that to, let's say, our vCenter server, it would protect every object that is underneath our vCenter server. All of the ESX hosts, all of the VMs, all the folders, directories, every object underneath there. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to apply that. I'm going to go into my VMware virtual machines. And again, earlier we talked about that global namespace and being able to, we have a Google-like search function. And I said that you can find and restore data with a few mouse clicks, a few keystrokes and a couple mouse clicks. So I'm going to type DWA because I know I've got 3 VMs and they have my name in it. So you can see that just with those few keystrokes, I was able to pull up exactly what I wanted and not a whole list of crazy things, but basically my 3 VMs. The reason I wanted to show this, and this is our vCenter server currently, and you can see that those same 3 VMs, I've got a Linux, a Windows, and a Windows clone, reside in vCenter. And that's when I do a live mount, I'll show you how that registers with vCenter as well. So at this point, I can pick up, let's protect my Windows VM. All I have to do is click this, hit Manage Protection, and now I can again search my DW test. It's instantly found, and basically just protect that VM. SLA applies may change, reassign, because it was sent under Do Not Protect. Now we're going to protect that environment, and within a few seconds, here we can see assigned SE DWADA and with DW test. So that is that VM SLA applied to that VM specifically. Any questions there? Okay, we'll move into, actually, let's see, we're going to go and live mount. Actually, we'll do a single level file restore first. So the other thing, if you remember our slider bar, we've got the teal ball that's right there. What these dots represent here are days that a snapshot has occurred. Now we're in the beginning of May, so I'm going to go back 1 month. And you can see that I've got daily snapshots occurring all the way through. It could be hourly, multiple snapshots in one day, all of those things. So from this standpoint, let's go back even further. And I want to click on the 19th just to show you something. Earlier when I said we ingest data, and based on our SLA policy, that data can sit locally, it can sit at your DR site, or it can sit in the cloud. I wanted to show you this little icon here. This is representation of the cloud or our archive site. Doesn't necessarily mean the cloud again, but it could be just our archive target. So if you can read that, I'll move my mouse out of the way. Snapshot is in the archival repository. So right there, I know that it's not at my local site, it's not at my DR site, it's in my archive repository. And I have the same functionality here. I can download, I can browse that snapshot, or I can launch it on cloud as well. So if I wanted to spin this VM up in the cloud and run it there, I can do that as well. So from that standpoint, again, we don't care where the actual data is, we can instantly recover it. So let's go back to my month, and we'll go something more recent. We'll go from Tuesday. And let's say that I wanted to run this VM. Something happened with my VM, and I wanted to go back to Tuesday because that's the only day that, when I think that, maybe the corruption was not there. All I have to do is go in and click next to the snapshot that I choose, and I can click Mount. And what that's going to do is I'm going to mount that VM on Rubrik, running in Rubrik, no impact to your production environment at all. We can do that same thing with SQL and soon to be with Oracle as well, where we can actually live mount those databases on the platform for test dev, just for patch management, something like that, to where you can actually work on it with no impact to your production environment whatsoever. It uses all the resources of the Rubrik cluster. For the purpose of this, let's say I'm just going to tell it I'm going to register it with vCenter through this ESX host, and I click Mount. And it says right here at the top right-hand corner, attempting live mount of my VM. Now I can go into my live mounts for my my VMware architecture and see that it is actually starting to mount currently. And this is my Windows clone. And one of the things that I will show you, and this should just take a few seconds, not very long, and then we're going to go into vCenter. And it's where you can see that it is actually reporting. And we'll refresh this. Move this over so you can see it. And here, again, now I have 4 VMs. So I have my Linux, Windows, Windows clone, and my time and date stamped Windows clone. Okay, since that's the one I live mounted, you can see the time and date stamp of the actual snapshot so that you know exactly where, what point in time you're activating that VM. Oops, click the wrong thing. So I go back in, as you can see it says powered on, and there's my Windows clone VM that we're talking about. Everybody following? Okay, we're going to go back into the VMs now, and I'm going to show you how easy a file level restore is. There's my, again, my mounted active copy of my Windows clone. We're going to go into, let's see, we'll go back into the Windows clone, and I will do a file level restore. And let's say, and again, I don't even have to know what snapshot or anything else. If I want the most recent file, let's say today, a user left yesterday on Wednesday, came in today, and they said, hey, for whatever reason, my host file is gone. I can't find it. I can just type in host. And this is every instance of a host file within those snapshots. So let's say I want to get the latest one. That one, it shows it up there, so I'm just going to grab the latest one. And all I want to do is that file, again, I didn't have to know where it was at. I didn't have to browse. I didn't have to do anything. I just typed it in, and it found the exact file I was looking for. Click this button, and I have 2 choices. I can restore it, instantly restore, where it basically just sends that data over to that VM and overwrites the file or puts the file back exactly there. Or I can download it, which again means I can send it to a temporary folder. I can put it on a USB key and hand it to them, which a lot of people frown on. But you have that capability. So you have flexibility to not only how you restore, but where to. In this case, we're just going to hit restore. And we're going to use the Rubrik backup service. Hopefully that's all executed. Okay. And earlier, this is a new VM for me, and I don't have the backup service installed, and we can continue anyway, and it'll probably fail. So, but basically that's all you need to do for a file level restore. Any questions? Once you click that button, it's basically restored and done. Any questions on that? And that's pretty much, hopefully it gives you a good idea of the interface, the ease of use, and how simple, people throw around the term easy button. We truly are the easy button for backup recovery, data management. From that perspective, again, finding the data, restoring the data is where we just really, really destroy all of our competitors. That's something that is, I would say, probably our #1 selling point. If anybody has had to recover data from either tape or even a remote archive or anything like that, first of all, finding the data is really the biggest hurdle. And then being able to restore that data is again, most of the time very cumbersome. We'll go back to the dashboard. And that's pretty much the extent of the demo. Has any other questions or anything that somebody would like me to dig into that's more specific or expand upon?
Dave, I have one question. You hear a lot in the end user industry about VM stun. Can you kind of allude to what that is a little deeper?
Basically, if there's a lot of backup jobs that kick off at the same time, Earlier we talked about automation, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we do that is different from say, your standard backup jobs. In your standard way of just executing a backup job, it's more or less just a schedule. And if you happen to have a lot of things scheduled at the same time, a lot of times it'll essentially attack your virtual environment. Let's say, we're with the amount of people that are virtualized at a high percentage nowadays, most backup software is touching a virtual environment in some way. So let's say you had a bunch of jobs that are scheduled about roughly the same time. They're overlapping, and so they're chewing up resources of your virtual environment because they're trying to pull that data. And that will definitely affect your ability for production. And there's a lot of things that execute at night where VMs are still being active, they're still doing things. We're a 24-hour world now, so it's not like before where it was 8 to 5 and then everything after 6 p.m. was your backup window. And it's just not the case anymore. So from that perspective, what we do is since we're an extension of your virtual environment, and again, that can be Acropolis, that can be Hyper-V, and that can be VMware as well, where we're an extension of that. We're communicating with vCenter, we're communicating with the management servers, and with that SLA policy, there's intelligence that automates that process, and we load balance all of that. So if we notice that we're utilizing, or if we're hitting a vCenter, and there's a lot of jobs that want to kick off, we'll actually hold those back so that we don't impact that virtual environment, and we don't impact your production capability at all. So again, there's the intelligence built into that SLA policy engine to where we're going to kick off those jobs, and the algorithms kind of determine what the best case scenario is for finishing those jobs.
That's great. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Dave, yes, thank you for the demo and all the great information that you and BJ have shared. We're at the top of the hour. I have a couple of questions queued up here in the question and answer queue. So while you're passing that ball back to me, Dave, I'll throw the first one out here. Does Rubrik have the ability to do disaster recovery or cloud migration as a service?
Yes, actually, we and BJ, you may know a little bit more about this. I know about the full capability. I know we recently released the ability to do data protection, cloud data management as a service. I don't know the full scope of it. Obviously, and this is something that I don't think we touched on earlier, but our licensing scheme is all inclusive. So when you buy Rubrik, you're getting everything that we have to offer from a feature set. We don't license individual capabilities. So we don't license the ability to replicate, or we don't license the ability for compression or anything like that. It's just all included. So I don't know the cost associated with our, essentially backup data protection as a service, but we do offer that.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say, from a migration perspective, obviously that's included. Depending on where your data sits, you can, have a virtual instance of Rubrik. Again, it depends on the size of the environment, a lot of factors that go into it. But absolutely, from a migration perspective, we would give you that ability. If we're doing the backup and data management as a service, we're also going to provide some migration capability.
Yeah, I can dig into that a little more. We certainly have that ability through a lot of our solution providers, and certainly through a lot of the larger FSIs. As the weeks and months go on, you'll be hearing about MilCloud and some other government-centric clouds. Now, as an OEM, we have an MSP, a managed service provider program, where Rubrik holistically and internally, on-prem or off-prem, can offer as a service, whether it be archiving or running an instance for like DR or something along that vein. And really what this means is the end user has the ability to pay with OpEx, not CapEx. So when sometimes the funds are changing, or the money has not been written to a certain program or contract, we can come in and do DR, archiving, and backup recovery as a service, on-prem, off-prem, through our partner community, or through Rubrik as an OEM. So yes, we do have that capability 100%.
Fantastic. Second question is, I heard about the new SaaS offering called Polaris. What is that?
I can take that one.
There you go.
Initially, Polaris is a monitoring and reporting, and it's done as a service as well. It's a global management interface. So let's say you've got a cluster, and again, a series of bricks. You've got a Rubrik cluster in your primary location. You've also got Rubrik in your DR location, and then you've also got, let's say we'll call it an instance of Rubrik running in the cloud somewhere, or even at an archive site. We basically, instead of managing those as silos individually, you would manage them from through Polaris, and it's a enterprise level global management interface. So currently, and as I said, it's going to monitor and it's going to do reporting. The next iteration of that, which and I don't know the exact time frame on when it will be released, but it will also give you the ability to create global SLAs. So you can go to one interface, create an SLA for all of your infrastructure. So your primary site, your DR site, your cloud archive, you can create global SLAs over that. So it ties in all of the different clusters into one management interface. Again, just extending our enterprise capabilities to our typically larger customers, but it by no means does it have to be a large customer to use it.
I can answer that a little bit also. Mm-hmm. The essence of what we do actually at Rubrik, you could argue by having data on the brick, or going to a cheap and deep, object store on or off-prem, or certainly public or private cloud. You could argue that what we're doing initially in the industry is creating data fragmentation. So what Polaris does is it goes ahead and it ties all of those disparate data silos back together again. So the customer has one pane of glass, so the customer has complete flexibility with holistic compliance and security for all of their data. And we go back to this again. This is huge. Now the customer, because when you defragment data and you can look at it all, you have the ability to run the analytics. That's the next step. If you're going to be a data management company, you have to excel with security and you have to excel with analytics. That's the next step, really. So that's the essence of Polaris. It's what separates us from every other software company in this space, and it's the next level for our customers. We're super excited about it.
Very good. There's one more question, but we're running really short on time here, but maybe there's a quick answer. So how does Rubrik help if I'm a victim of ransomware? I saw this reference on your website.
I can go ahead and take that. Basically, ransomware doesn't affect us. Each one in the term from the slides is immutable data. So what we do is we ingest data. We're ingesting an initial full copy, and then we do incremental forever. And what that means is we're only doing those incremental block level delta changes after that initial full copy. As soon as we write data, it's encapsulated and it's immutable. It cannot be changed. It's essentially read-only. So from a ransomware perspective, our platform, our file system is completely protected. Let's say if you've got Rubrik in your environment and somebody was able to use ransomware for your production data, you can simply go over to Rubrik and then restore that data back from your most recent snapshot. So again, they grab that production copy because it is read-write, and they were able to grab a hold of it. We can simply overwrite that, and that ransomware piece is essentially gone from that standpoint. And they do not have the ability to grab ours because of that immutable data, the way the file system is constructed.
That's fantastic. So I don't see any more questions here. We'll jump over here and just say thank you to everyone that's participated today for your attendance and for your attentiveness through the demonstration. Thank you, BJ, Dave, Zach, for the great information. Reminder to everyone that we'll be heading into part 3 of our series next Thursday at the same time. We'll be covering the topic of software management featuring Cisco. So again, thank you to everyone. If you have any questions, follow up, please feel free to reach out to Zach or Brooke. Their information will stay here on the screen as we wrap up the call. Talk to you next week.
Yeah, we really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Take care.